Anybody else want to share about that?
Karen and I were together. For me, it was I think the mood of being attentive, and Karen helped me to try to put it into a posture. The posture was where I'm taking something from it and trying to offer something back as well in terms of examples to clarify my understanding. It felt as if there was a wider thing about what I take and what I give, and keeping the balance there. Sometimes it gets out of balance. And in the posture, I felt that my right shoulder was it was up here when I stood up. And Karen just asked me the question, which helped me to just drop that shoulder and just relax a little bit more. We spoke about my predominant style in these sorts of workshops is trying to make loads of notes and get every last detail. Something about maybe they're about just chilling out for a moment. That the essence can get lost as I round down all the detail.
Okay. Just a couple of things. One of them is you've mentioned Genlin and focusing, and I don't know how many people know about that approach that he has called focusing. Is it? Okay. It's not got common for you. Okay. We might have time to do something more later on it, but basically Genlin has this approach called focusing, and his abiding interest is how people connect with what he calls a felt sense. In other words, we have in our bodies a felt sense, which is in a way what you've been doing. That mood or whatever is usually located somewhere in the body. And so his whole approach, and he came out of the person-centered approach, is about how to connect with that felt sense, which he sees as a kind of almost like the gathering up of people's tacit understanding, pre-reflective understanding of what's happening to them. So his whole approach to therapy is all about helping people pay attention to that and getting the meaning in it, like getting a word or an image or something like that. And he says, when you've got it, because you experience a kind of a release, a kind of a aha moment. Got it. I understand it. And I go along with him in that. So, because I use it a lot for myself. It's what we've done. Remember, sometimes I've taken you back and saying, imagine you're about to meet a client. Remember that sort of thing. And just what feeling does that bring up? And see if you can get an image or a word that catches that really resonates with it. That's Genlin's stuff in a nutshell, really. So and it's Genlin that wrote the paper that is very incomprehensible about Befindlichkeit in Heidegger, because he sees in Heidegger if you like, the philosophical home for what he's talking about. That this stuff it gathers. Our experience of being in the world is gathered up in that sense. And Nick, you sent me this paper on intuition because we were talking about whether it's the same territory, and I think it is exactly the same territory. I think intuition is the kind of word that people have been using that captures a lot of this stuff. Just quoting from one part of this paper that you sent, where it says things like, got a list here that's about intuition. Do you trust your hunches? Well, that's something about that. Do you feel in your body if a decision is right? Do you put a lot of faith in your initial feelings? Do you put more emphasis on feelings than data? Do you rely on your gut feeling? We're in the same territory here when we talk about gut feeling, about intuition, and of course use of self. Because this is precisely, I think, what makes sense of the whole thing about use of self, which is about noticing what's happening for me when I'm in the presence of someone. Something shifts in me, and that I think we're all the time talking about the same stuff, about that tacit, pre-reflective way something is registered with us. So I can use Befindlichkeit, I think, to be in the same territory as these other words like intuition. I think Befindlichkeit might have the edge on intuition, because intuition is almost something to say, well, it comes to me sometimes. From Heidegger's perspective, with Befindlichkeit, mood, it's always with us. We can never be out of a mood. So it's almost, that is always there to pay attention to.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I feel for myself that I'm quite intuitive, but then colleagues I would principally not so much I work with now, but colleagues I've worked with in the past would say, from a business point of view, how intuition can play a part, because it's got to be evidence-based, etc. So I'm just trying to think, in an organisation, what's the, how you can capture that intuition. Sometimes it perhaps has to be suppressed. Or
if I was to be rude, I think that evidence-based stuff is often a lot of bollocks.
Yes. Well, I would agree with you. Yeah.
And it's the Cartesian thing about we should better get clear objective, but it never is rooted deeply enough in whatever it is. It gives the impression of security, and as if you've got some firm ground. But I don't think it does.
Intuition will come before the evidence-based. Nothing evidence-based ends up in, that's not the start point for anything. It's always intuitive. Somewhere or other, it's mood-based or intuitive first.
People often
How
know
they're managed is something different, and that's about putting some shackles and parameters.
Yeah. My hunch is that people will go along with evidence-based stuff as long as it feels right.
Yes. And certainly have faith in it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Gather the evidence
So what?
That's
about assurance and reassurance.
One of the interesting things in the article was about how people in executive positions in leadership often use intuition as a basis for decision making, but then post-rationalise it using all kinds of data, because culturally that's what we would need in order to be convincing with peers and stuff.
That sounds really helpful, because actually in a way in the real world we do need to get into those places where evidence-based is important, even if whatever way we're using to manage. So it feels like quite a good method.
I guess the stuff we're talking about, they provide the grounds for then arguing a case and deploying evidence and such like. So it's not like, because if you just go down, it's all intuition. I guess that is pretty dangerous. And it's just as if that's all it is. But it feels to me like it's a start, the foundation from which other stuff then can be, when you can start to make more sense of it. Of course, it's the Heidegger thing. It's the present at hand. It's about taking a step back and then seeking to make more rational, more evidence-based sense of something.
I was just thinking, not for now, but an interesting reflection would be, how come we are so in a society at the moment, or in a culture that is so evidence-based? I mean, there's a thing on the radio about measuring happiness and all that sort of stuff. And you just think, what is going on that this has become, and also about all the brain and how the brain is absolutely this, but the brain's about this, so we need to focus on, so there's something about the scientific or the rational biting back into being very present in the culture of today.
Culture of fear.
And they may well.
Generated. It's not quite fear as anything else. And I was wondering whether there's a gender thing in here too. Generally speaking, people say that more intuitive men in commerce, corporations, still run under the old boys rules, you know, and that's pretty much the case. And therefore, you know, and I've seen it in the boardroom over donkey issues, you know, there is, you know, intuition is not welcome. It necessarily, you know, it may say it is, but it isn't. And women, in my experience, with these solutions are much more intuitive, in that they know, they feel it's the right thing to do, generally is too. But it gets delayed or it gets watered down by male, men quite often saying we've got to play by the rules. That wasn't in there, you know. But I think it's big, and for whatever reason.
This goes into some other stuff. I'm not sure we've got it this, but from a Heidegger perspective, if you're playing by the rules, you're playing by what one does. But expertise, which is what intuition is rooted in, is when you go past what one does and gets in and really gets into what it is.
Yes.
So it's almost like the more you get into it and the more experience you've got, then the Befindlichkeit is more firmly grounded, and therefore you can just act. So he's talking about acting, not before you think, which is what people who are really skilled do. So we were talking earlier. A leader who is really skilled, they just know the situation in a way that you could never compute, never write a program for, never write the rules for or the competencies for, because they're deeply absorbed in it, and they're not using the more kind of other frameworks that mean you're actually not absorbed in it. You're trying to find a competency framework, for example, is just so far away from. They're kind of a starting point, really, to map the territory. I've got the image of a competency framework as like if people, if they want to explore some territory, they might map it out first, and then it's like it maps the territory, but then you've got to dig into it rather than thinking the framework does the job for you.
Yeah, it's not designed for that. It's designed for conformity.
I think I'm following the discussion. What is sparking in my mind is the anxiety with complexity, the anxiety with something that's big and confusing, and by chopping it up into different pieces, it then becomes the anxiety gets if all you have to do is look after a little piece of the whole, then the anxiety gets smaller, and people. I'm not sure what I'm saying. It just feels that not addressing the whole intuitively. That it's harder to address the whole intuitively. But maybe that's it. It feels harder to address it intuitively in this sort of way. But the invitation I think you're giving us is to try it anyway. Maybe it's a muscle that can be exercised. Is that where you're? Well,
let's not get too right now into this, but my sense is that competency frameworks are probably, in Heideggerian terms, what one puts in place. I was thinking about, for decades, people used to trust professionals. They used to trust in people's professionalism, doctors and so forth. And then they said, this is not good enough. We need to put in a competency framework. And we'll measure people in terms of, like with coaches, in terms of their competencies. So it's as if the notion of professionalism, which is rooted in real engagement, has become suspect. And that we've got to find a way, the one needs to find a way of managing that and having oversight of it. Let's
I came across Heidegger in some reading I was doing, which was by Otto Scharmer, and he talked about knowledge in three different ways around knowledge that is there, and then tacit knowledge, and then not yet embodied knowledge, and that not yet embodied knowledge or self-transcendent knowledge, he equates to some of the Heidegger sense
Right.
stuff. And I think the bit that I really then like is what Sharma does, which uses this analogy of pregnancy, where actually the evidence base is the birth. You know, because you can see it and it's there, and that sort of tacit knowledge is the gestation. But the bit, the way nothing can happen, is a conception, and it's that sense. And for me, that just made so much sense, that analogy of, unless you have that intuition, that conception of thought somewhere, you can't have any feeling stuff. And you've got to be able to kind of, it's not there, but we kind of almost got to be able to touch it and feel it in that way. Yeah, that's
Okay.
Okay.
I want to move on now. What we're going to do, I've got a bit more chunk of stuff, and then I'm just checking out how much stamina everyone's got, because I think we're doing some heavy duty work here. So I'm going to do one more chunk, and then there'll be time to get into your learning groups, just, you know, have a chance to really try and process some of this stuff. But the bit I want to get on to now is another couple of key bits, because, and this touches on the whole notion, the existential stuff that we'll get back into tomorrow properly, but it's important here, is, so we've talked all about us as cultural beings, and you might end up thinking, you know, we're socialised into sort of autonomans, whatever, into just the one, and just doing what everybody else does. But for Heidegger, in his notion of, if you have to ask him what human nature is, or human essence, he's not going to give you a thing like Freud might about instincts or whatever. He's going to give you an existential statement, which is that the essence of Dasein is potentiality to be. It's what we can be, which is what, so in saying in its very being, that being is an issue for it, for us. The fact that how and what can I be is he sees as the real essence of us, that we have potentiality to be. This quote from Dreyfus, where Dasein is concerned, possibility is higher than actuality. In terms of coaching, this should be familiar stuff really. It's like what we can be is greater than what we are now. And in fact, coaching is all about what can we be. Here I am now. We've talked about it in coaching in terms of between performance and potential. You can see somebody's performance now, that's what we have before us. But what is their potential? And I think this is exactly the territory. And he's putting this is putting this as the focus of human nature, if you like. It's our potentiality to be. But in Heideggerian terms, this is not an abstract potentiality. It's all about potentiality in context, in the culture, if you like. So the way he puts it is that we're always pressing into possibilities in the situation. So whatever, if it's work, what are the possibilities, both in the situation and what are the possibilities for the person? So these come together. It's our own possibilities to be as can happen in the circumstances we're in. If you're a football player, it's about developing your capabilities, your potential as a football player in a particular team, if you like, with a particular coach, in a particular league. So then this notion of potentiality and possibilities goes both ways. It's in the situation and it's in the person. And that makes real sense for me when I'm coaching somebody. It's like, how can they be? How can they be in the situation? If it's leadership development, then what are the possibilities in the circumstances they are in, and in themselves to take on this role? So if there's any essence to human being, this is it.
You mentioned role towards the end. I wonder if role might go a little earlier in that narrative. It feels as if in a work context, my experience is that often people don't understand, haven't thought enough about what the frame of their role is, what it's inviting them to do, and they enter it partially. But by putting the role, like being clear on what the role needs to be or is, then the possibilities afforded to them by that role, I think, will often become clearer.
So I think, and we'll talk about this again in a minute, in phenomenology, part of our job as coaches, the phenomenological perspective is, so what, from your experience, what is the role? It's you might have a definition of it, but taking people deeper into their sense of what this is and how they are in it is.
There are three questions that are sometimes, in my experience, asked there. One is, what does the role need to be? What do you think the role is? And what does one observe that person actually doing? There could be three different takes on it.
Okay. Because I think what you're catching there is something like the reality of what is out there, and actually getting hold of that is a crucial part of this. Does that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Have you come across the work of Rosemary Stewart, who talks about demands, constraints and choices? She says that anybody in a role has the demands that anybody who did that role would have, and they have the constraints, the organisation you work for, but then they have choices, and she believes that most people don't really recognise the choices they have in a role. Well, that's them, what they, that sense of being, it's what the person in that role brings, what choices they have.
Well, again, we're in the same territory. When we talk tomorrow, Heidegger talks about people's own most possibilities, which is the possibilities that we can have, that we can make our own. And I guess the key part in the whole approach here is, and we normally don't attend to all those possibilities. There's often a pressure to be like the one, for example, and to step out of what people, the possibilities that people normally take. It feels dangerous. It raises anxiety. So there is a sense of how to claim my life for myself and find my way into these possibilities. I'm wondering what sense you make of this as an essence for human beings, that it's about our potentiality to be.
You just reminded me of Jonathan in The Secret.
Okay. Just so say some more, because it's ages.
And the strapline I give Jonathan Livingston's Secret is the only limitations in life are those that you put on yourself.
Right.
So the whole essence of the story is, if you can see outside of the crowd, you'll attain your possibilities.
Right. Okay.
That's my sense
and
of that story.
Can you feel the tension, which we'll look at more tomorrow, between the story he's been telling up to now about ourselves as cultural beings and how we find our own way in the circumstances, and the pull that the one has for us to just do what people do?
Yes, I think when we were talking about the importance of culture before, I was getting really, I could see a sort of, like a lack of hope there, sort of like actually we're all just doing what everybody else does. So this part brings in a sort of the possibility, the potentiality, the hope in a way of, so what does that mean for me? Who do I want to be in? What is my potential? Yeah, so there's a sort of like an energy coming from that.
Yeah. So this is the existential strand that's beginning to enter the story. So application to coaching. Let's just talk a bit more about this. And there might be more to say than I've got on the slides, because some stuff came up earlier. But I'd just like to put this up here, which is, when you think it's written in Heideggerian ease, doesn't make it easy, but also it's written in 1926. So he talks about two forms of solicitude, which is about concerned being with others. And he says there's two modes of doing this. One is leaping in, which behind all those words means that you just leap in and do it for somebody, and they can either then, he says, the other is thrown out of his position, he steps back, so afterwards, when the matter has been attended to, he can either take it over as something finished and at his disposal, or disburden himself of it completely. I think I may have told you about the great temptation I had with my son John to write his essay for him. Was I telling you about this last time? The most difficult coaching assignment I've had recently was when John had to do an assignment and it was getting really late and there was great anxiety in the system. I could see how he could do it. So I was really tempted. In fact, even started to do it. Say, no, do it like this, and because I was anxious and I was about to create something which, what does it say here? He can either take it over as something finished. He can either take this essay that I've done, or say I don't want this at all. Which is really about giving advice. And actually, I went to bed and the next morning I just apologised to him and said, look, sorry, this is no good. What I did. Let's go back to you. And he wrote an essay. It wasn't nearly as good as the one I was going to do. But it was his. And it went off in a different way that I could have. So that's the other way. And it's funny. It is you can leap ahead of him in his existential potential to be, not in order to take away his care, but rather to give it back to him authentically for the first time. By which he means you can let people find their own way and their own authenticity, their own potential, which sounds like that's what we say in coaching, isn't it?
Coaching style management as well, isn't
it?
It's exactly that, isn't it? Where someone comes in and you take it over and you sort it, and actually learning through coaching techniques how to get somebody to.
Yeah.
So these Heidegger's words, John?
Yeah.
Not sorry, just do that.
Yeah, that's Heidegger's words. So really he's saying about helping people find their own potentiality, their own way, and he says authentically, it's them, it's theirs. It's not us leaping in and taking over and coming up with the finished piece which we're pleased with, but it's not of much use to the other.
So this is speaking to the previous line, the potentiality to be.
Yes.
And its application to which.
That's right.
For me, with the leap ahead is a really interesting image of that, which is of a toddling child, and I have to be here, sort of holding the space and watching and being in awe of potential that the child can actually walk.
Yeah.
But I can't do it for them, and I can just be ahead as they come towards me, saying, "You are brilliant," or whatever I'm saying, and that's allowing the person to.
And parental anxiety can mean that you're not alongside, but you get there first to finish it, to complete it, to make it all right, to make it people doing their kids' homework, all sorts of stuff. And in doing that, they take it away from the child. It's essentially saying, I haven't got the faith in you that you can do it on your own.
I had this flashback then to the early comments about Heidegger and the Nazis.
Yeah.
I was thinking, from the dates he gave us before the Second World War, so it's when the Nazis were still kind of forming their own ideology and such. And I was thinking, you could interpret this as, in the way the Nazis did, that you're looking for people who've got a superior potential and how you nurture that potential to become the Ubermensch kind of superior beings. Yeah. The ones who really release this full human potential. And the idea of supporting the weak, which Nietzsche or Christianity, for instance, is doing, is just like anathema. It's like you shouldn't be trying to support the weak, so you should get rid of the kind of Ross's name and see it. You're trying to really release them to nurture this potential to become this kind of superior.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if in some of this I could see how the Nazis could see a resonance in some of this with what they were.
Well, it might be how you're attuned to it. Because we'll see tomorrow he talks about not being lost in the one. Well, that can both be an exhilarating notion. If you start seeing the masses as the one, and that you need to, take a stand on your being and blah blah blah, then that morality to put alongside it can be dangerous stuff. Let's look at this stuff we got into earlier about phenomenology, because in terms of how you go about your work as a coach, I think this notion of phenomenology is key. So phenomenology, as with Gestalt, is about raising awareness of what is, rather than seeking causes. Now, I'm guessing that's familiar ground in a way from the stuff that we did. It's about how do you work with someone so that they become more aware of their circumstances to themselves, and you're not seeking. If you're a Freudian, you'd be seeking to explain why somebody is as they are because of an Oedipus complex or something like that. And this phenomenology is hermeneutic, which is another philosophical term, which basically means it's about giving meaning, that we give meaning to stuff. So we don't just see bare sensation. If you think of the vase and the faces, you see one or the other, don't you? So we give meaning to our perceptions. We shape it up, and we do that immediately. You don't have to think about it first. We just see it. So Heidegger says what we first hear is never noises or complexes of sounds, but the creaking wagon, the motorcycle. We hear the column on the march, the woodpecker tapping, the fire crackling. In other words, we immediately give meaning to a situation, to circumstance. We don't kind of sort of have lots of different sensations. So we give a global meaning to the circumstances. Is that familiar ground? Okay, so that's the familiar ground. I think the difference between Gestalt and the Heidegger perspective is what I said earlier. Gestalt is rooted in the individual psychology of the perceiver, of the person. In other words, it's the individual's needs that organises perception. The cycle of experience is structured around the emergence and satisfaction of individual needs. So, if I'm thirsty, the thirst starts to become apparent, and then it starts to dominate my perception. I'll be looking out for water. I might be thinking about how long to the end of the session, how can I get some water, so on and so forth. I take action, I drink the water, need disappears, and another need emerges. So it's all organised around the individual psychology. For Heidegger, and this is where I think Befindlichkeit is key, it's not just about the individual psychology, it's about us in a situation. Remember, meaning for Heidegger is not a personal thing, it comes from the culture. So the general meanings that structure our lives, they're not individually created. We absorb the meaning, but then having absorbed it, what organises my own perception? Because we've all noticed that individuals perceive things differently. And I think this is where Befindlichkeit, again, is key. It's that mood that is organising. It's my curiosity. How did you describe it earlier? It was quizzicalness. It's the quizzicalness that is organising. That's my attunement to it. Or it might be tiredness. So it's and that sense is not just my own. It is me, but it's not just me. It's me in the circumstance. So I think this is a key shift between the two. Well, first one, the Gestalt is about individual need. This is about me and the situation, or the situation I'm in, are both organising the field. There's the field out there. There's the using that word field. There is what there is, and then there is my attunement to it, how I'm attuned. So I think that's the difference. Is that difference making sense to you?
I might
Go on.
disagree with you.
I'm
Right.
struggling with some of it as well.
Okay.
Just because I would think that sort of much more modern Gestaltists would be saying things like it's getting my needs met in the best way in the circumstances that we're in. So I would say So Jenny McEwen's book would say that always. So you may not go round to satisfaction of your need to end that gestalt. You may decide along the way, because of the circumstances that you're in, that it's better to stay interrupting and going around the cycle. So I would think that probably Pearls would be much more with what you're saying, but I think more modern gestaltists would put in the context or the field conditions to be making the best thing in those circumstances. So
Okay.
I
think I would, when I said earlier on, I think gestalts make a leap. My difficulty with what I talked earlier about 1- and 2-person psychologies is I couldn't see how, if you don't make a leap that you're not acknowledging, how you can bring the whole world into that. That's my take on it. That somehow Gestalt starts with an individual need that's organising the field, and then it's almost like make a jump to say, and we can talk about the real world out there. So that's my sense of it.
I think the answer is some things around my belief that some of the Gestalt stuff is all around that sort of wholeness and holistic. And my interpretation of that is about, and that would mean more than just me, in the internal me and whatever it is I can bring to that, there is more out there as well. And that's the bit that I'm struggling with. Either I misunderstood something in Gestalt, or I'm not quite getting it in the way that you're getting it, in that very concrete sense of difference. It feels very similar to me.
Okay, well, I mean, maybe this isn't the time or the place, or we don't even have a need to kind of bottom this, because I guess the difference is, or the important thing, well, what does it, what,
they make something.
how can we use this is maybe the key thing.
Could you just say a little bit more? I absolutely get the sort of, high-level distinction about Gestalt is about the individual, and James' comment, and Heidegger is the individual within the system or within the circumstance. But the bit about, I can remember we did it before, could you say it again, a bit about it's about the Heidegger approach looks at this before you separate subject and objective.
Okay.
I'm just trying to
So
that bit in
my sense of, have I put it on the next?
Oh, sorry.
No, I just wondered if the next thing took it to us. My sense is, if you, phenomenologically, if I'm exploring a situation, say I'm exploring my sense of being in this room, and I kind of give an account of it. As I'm giving an account of it, I'm not talking about subjective or objective. I'm just giving an account of being in this room. And the thing about subjective or objective is a more kind of an analytical statement about where you start to put things. So if I was working in this, I'm thinking that this is not. I haven't got all the answers here, and this is work in progress for me. So this is a good conversation because I'm trying to make sense of this in the work I do. I might get it better like this. Because I've come from a psychotherapy background, when I've listened to somebody in the past from a phenomenological perspective, I've always really been thinking about what's going on in their internal world. I've been understanding from that perspective. What are they feeling? How are they? What are they thinking here? How is that structuring what they're doing? With this, I feel much more able to think. Tell me about yourself in the situation, and let's just hear about that. Let's just go into that more. And some of the time, they will be talking about, I don't know, it might be about the way that something's organised at work, and then they will be talking about something about their experiencing themselves in that situation in work. And then at that point, it feels like, well, we can go off you can understand it in these different territories, But we're not talking about the inner and the outer game as two separate realms. And how do you deal with one and not the other? There was a symbol. Have you ever seen that Tao symbol of the two interleaving circles? When one's black and one's white. Have you? Yin and yang. Sorry. Have you seen that? My sense of it is something like, if I go for, in terms of the inner and outer, if the inner is the white bit and the outer, as soon as I start paying attention to one, the other emerges. As soon as I start paying attention to the circumstances somebody's in, we will look at that, and out of that will come how they are in it. And as we go into how they are in it, the circumstances are. If you think of empathy, Heidegger, the individual psychology thing of empathy is almost like, I've got my experience, and I have to somehow get inside your head and sort of see about what your experience is and sort of try and meet them. I think this perspective is, we live in a shared world. So when we say, what would it be like to travel in somebody else's shoes, we really are, I really am thinking, what would it be like to be in that situation? It's not about trying to peek into somebody else's head. It's more like, well, what's it like being in this world? And that captures both world and person in that world in the same moment.
Yeah, you said if you give an account of what it's like to be in this room, you're not being subjective or objective. Are you not being subjective because it's your account of what it's like to be in this room?
Well, it will certainly be my account, but in the telling of it, if I was to say, there's something about a phenomenology of a white room, there's pictures, I can see you here. As I'm saying this thing, my thing is not subjective or objective, it's just the way it is for me. And then if you challenge me, I can start to break it down into. And the question is, I might go into a Cartesian sort of paradigm of, well, some of it's internal and some of it's external. But before that, which is what Heidegger was interested in, it isn't either. It's just what it is. And so I think the permission that this gives me, and this is just because of the way I've been in the world, is from my psychotherapy perspective, I always used to think that if I started talking about the external world, I was getting away from the real stuff. This says, no, I'm not getting away from the real stuff, because how somebody is in the world is the real stuff. But we can attune our focusing our attention to one aspect or the other. Are you with this?
It makes me think of, if there's the individual and then the world around them. You're almost speaking where there is no, where one meets the other and they become each other in that yin and yang. That it sort of begs a question on boundaries and how people perceive the boundaries around them in relation between them and their environment, and how with clarifying those boundaries that people can all get mobilized.
The Befindlichkeit Heidegger notion is really useful because in that it's saying they're both here, both the external and the internal, if you want to use those words. They are both here, and I can understand this feeling as telling me something about the world. I can understand this same feeling as telling me what matters to me in this world and how I'm attuned to it. So it's almost like I can pay attention to it in different ways, but it's not like something in the chemistry where you can just distill out the bits. It's their being together that matters. It's not them as separate realms.
Jeff, can I ask you a question? As you got more into the sort of Heidegger coaching concepts and things, has that changed your coaching?
It is. It is.
How so?
So, for example, I find it's as if I've shifted, so I can't quite get back to just hearing about people's experience as their own private experience. So I can't just deal with people's emotions just their emotions. They are theirs, I know they are, but I find myself also wondering about what it says about the circumstances they're in. It also, I find myself wondering about what this says about how they bring themselves into this situation. So I can't help but do that now. I think that's the biggest shift for me at the moment.
In doing that, does it enable you to challenge them and give that feedback to them?
It's not so much, I don't think it's so much the feedback, it's more like how I then respond. So it just shifts the kind of, in the past I would have then probably, I'm still interested in how they got to where they are, in terms of their life, and that may be relevant, but I think I'll be more interested, rather than how you got there, to explore what's going on in this circulating you and the circumstance, rather than how the more therapeutic thing. Well, what happened in your life that you're in the position you are, and if you can grab hold of that and make sense of that, then you'll change yourself, and then you can be different in the world. How's the energy going here?
So you can change yourself and be different from the world. So that comes back to like CBT, what you're talking about, changing the way you think about.
Yeah. See, if go back to CBT, if you just think about CBT now, I think this is me being prejudicial and shallow probably, but I actually think I do find it really shallow. In terms of what we're talking about, if you just think the idea is if you change somebody's belief, if they think about it differently, then the world will be different, and they can act in the world differently, and it will all be better. I just don't think that's good enough. It doesn't get the whole inertia, if you like, of the world we're in, and the impact of the actual world. It's not all about what I think about it. That's my take on it.
And as you say that can be actually quite a damaging thing if someone's going into CBT and they find that actually it's not working for them.
Yeah.
There's a sort of sense of like, oh, it's all to do with me and how I'm thinking, there's something wrong with me. So they get more depressed.
Now, what might work is actually, because it's CBT, it's behavioural now, and often with it goes a thing about, so how are you going to go and do something different? Now I think at that point you've got more chance, because although people are saying it's the beliefs, they're actually going and doing something different, has the possibilities of acting in the world and perhaps getting a shift in the world. So I think that the behavioural bit kind of gives it a bit more grasp on the world, and maybe developing skills in the world. Because this is another bit for me that I never had till I did Heidegger, because it seems so superficial from a therapy point of view. But it's about developing skills. I've realised that when people used to do stuff on confidence and self-confidence, I used to think it was about magically changing somebody's view about themselves, their beliefs about themselves. I'm more and more coming to the view that actually developing a sense of, use that word, competence, skilled capability, is actually at the heart of developing self-confidence. If somebody goes into a situation and they can do something and do it in a skilled way and competent way, then they've got a foundation for developing self-confidence. So this is another really critical way, and it still feels a bit icky for me, a bit unfamiliar territory. I don't feel, this is where I'm not very skilled, because my skills are in the psychotherapy. I'm less skilled, I think, in getting people to think about. So work with, get hold of the situation. What is the situation? What is the practices here? Say leadership. What are the leadership practices? How do you go about it? And what skills do you need to develop here? What mindset, I'm going to use mindset, when you think about presence, we talk a lot about presence, that's about a different way of bringing yourself into the world. So all that, it's come back to you, I think you brought this up
Well,
earlier.
that's exactly the question I I was raising this morning, really, and I was sharing with a couple of other colleagues that I guess having been trained to coach in a very non-directive manner, one of the things I continually take to supervision is sometimes it feels a bit of a dislocate between well, it's exactly about this. You're sitting with clients who are in executive position, often confidence, often it's all of that stuff about confidence. And you're working through, so what would you do differently, or how would you do that? And they're really looking, well, I often find, they're really looking for you as a coach to absolutely be on that sort of agenda with them. And yet it always feels to me, there's always this, bit of self-one that's going on saying, but we're not, I'm not sure if this is our territory. But actually I've been, wading all over it because that bit about keeping to the coach's agenda. But I'm just finding this extremely interesting because the way you are articulating it now, I'm sorry to those people who aren't really being trained, but perhaps others will share that. This is it feels quite a markedly different shift,
I think so.
actually, than what we were looking at even 18 months, 2 years ago. And I feel that A is interesting, B, I'm thinking, is that just me feeling that? And C, I just think that opening up of that agenda is, absolutely four square for what we do as a coach. And your point, what can we bring differently for ourselves as a result of looking at this? Sorry, I'm rambling.
No, you're absolutely not rambling. It's spot on. Because my sense of it is that the stuff that we teach and we have taught has come from the humanistic background, which is that people have the answers within themselves, which again is the Cartesian thing. It's all in there. And so if we shift and believe that it's not all in there, but it's about being in the world and developing skills, how, taking in mind Heidegger's thing about not leaping ahead, it feels like it's opening up really interesting territory, which we haven't got the answers to yet. But it seems to me it's not just about believing that the person's got all the answers and I'm just here to help them find the answers that are already within. There is something more to it than that. And so where this began was, maybe it's about the skills thing, isn't it? And about how to, this feels so mundane, it feels a bit like, beneath me, as a psychotherapist. This is why it's so uncomfortable, but gritty territory. I do now, I've got to the place of believing it's about helping people raise their awareness of what is, raising their awareness of how they're bringing themselves in, and also what they need to have in place to be able to do what is needed in this situation. Well, I think there is a lot to be said for the grow model.
Because sometimes it's this sometimes it's this overlooked, I think, isn't it, as a simplistic. The slides, you probably don't remember, when you came to the Merseyside coaching first year annual, and you brought this one time they had the topic, the tea grow model. And I still see things referred to as the grow model. That topic, that what's going, because I do believe people come to coaching really with something. There is some reason that they're elected to come for coaching or nominated for coaching. There's some sort of topic going on there. And I think it's a really good model sometimes.
I've said many times I think it's underrated,
I was just going to check something out about the idea of achievement. And is that suggesting that your achievement is cultural, or it's your relational kind of your internal to external. Because then if it's the latter, surely other psychologies or schools we thought are very relevant in terms of what you pay attention to. And then I'm not sure how it's different to some of the ideas around Gestalt in terms of your field, basically how it looks and what you're paying attention to is kind of coming from the internal.
I think it's both. So I think culture attunes us in a certain way. If you go into a culture, for example, that is a business that's very results driven, then the culture of that organisation is pace setting, maybe command and control pace setting, I don't know. That will attune you to in a certain way. There's no way you can step outside of it. Like it or not, it'll be there. But then I think we have our own attunements, which is like to do with my own personal history. I know if I get into a pace setting circumstance, it does hit me, but my attunement is one of great resistance to it.
So I'm just checking,
Yeah.
they're not mutually exclusive?
No, I don't think so, no.
Okay.
So my way of understanding it, which is what is the situation and how am I bringing myself into it, is they both come together sort of thing, and we need to get hold of both.
Jeff, is there more in that as well in terms of how they interrelate between the two, so both your own internal culture, as it were, and the external?
Okay, so one thing that comes to mind as you say that is that whole notion of being tuned and attunement. So
if you're not, you get rejected.
Well, what am I tuned to? Like a tuning fork, will mean that I engage with the situation, I make sense of it, and act in a certain way. Which maybe I go along with it, maybe I rebel against it. But however I then am, whatever my attunement is going to have real impact, and I'm going to get the backwash from that real impact. I might get promoted, I might get fired. Does that answer it?
Yeah. So what you're saying is both things need to be attended to.
Yes.
Neither is better or worse.
Yeah.
But they are both. They're both alongside each
Yeah.
other or interwoven. Whereas the more psychotherapeutic way would be looking at your internal world.
That's right.
And I might start thinking, the parenting style and does that
Yeah.
stuff. But here you're saying it's the culture of the place that you find yourself in.
Right.
But I can struggle with that, is that then that's also your own personal attunement to that kind of outside world, which is then what you hold internally, which is part of your own internal resources for finding your own solutions as a coachee. So that sense of you saying that internally that Cartesian approach is that the person is sort of further resourceful is kind of contradictory to the Heidegger view. If you put attunement into that and then put attunement in the person, that to me then brings it all together.
I think the Cartesian thing means that all of the knowledge is just its self-actualization. It's always said it's like a little egg that needs to find its own way. It makes little reference to the real world, whereas my sense of what we bring in is about our history. It's about what we've learned. I've become who I've become through a whole culture of learning and becoming.
From my experience.
That's right. So we each come in our own personal way, but that personal way is almost like how we've differentiated ourselves within a culture, rather than the Cartesian, the humanistic. It's almost like a kind of an essence that we were born with, which is looking for a place to express itself, and that you mustn't get in the way of that. And that the coach is there just to help them find their own true self in all of this. I mean, I'm not sure. Does it feel like it's becoming too abstract to matter? this stuff, or in practice?
I think it's really good stuff. I think from the discussion, I'm just drawn back to the question that Karen asked this morning, actually, that if you had a situation, you had a manager in a company or whatever, sitting in front of you, the company is, he, she or he faces some issues. What in practice would be different from perhaps a more Gestalt approach to the approach that you might be taking now, where you just said that you change your practice? Could we crystallise what those differences might be?
Okay, so is it somebody who's coming in very anxious or something like that? Was that the so if someone's coming in very anxious, there's if I'm using Befindlichkeit as the question is, what is this about? And in some ways it speaks of this word up there, their thrownness into the world. It's it's their history. So there's something about what's happened to them, their own personal history, that's a part of what their anxiety is about. And you could see that in terms of their attunement to the world. And I think, as in my previous way, I would have spent most of my time looking at the person, their anxiety, and their history, understanding of that. It might be, the parenting, family. So all that stuff's still relevant. If I'm looking at Befindlichkeit in terms of, and it's also telling me something about the situation that they're resonating to. So what is it in that situation as well? If this is information, there is something anxiety making in that situation. It's not just down to their projections or whatever. That's important to get a handle on too. And I think the third bit is, and it's interesting because I'm getting this as I'm talking, it's almost like, and what is maybe it's their lack of competence, or what is it about the situation and the circumstances that they haven't got what they need to tackle it, which could be developing the skills, developing the awareness of how to be in this situation that they haven't currently got. And so I think I'll be looking at the history and how they're bringing themselves in. I'll be trying to understand the circumstance, and this is the bit that's really new, I think, for me. What is the practice that they are currently unable to grasp and work effectively in?
Are you saying that you're taking the leap ahead by going through that process to see what it is?
The leap ahead, I think, would be helping the person find what the circumstances is and what potentiality there is in them and the circumstance. So how could they come at this? What are the possibilities in the situation so that they can come at it in a way that enables something to happen that needs to happen, which might be something quite new, something that's never been done before, but also what are the possibilities that need developing in themselves to enable them to do that. And you can talk about that in terms of emotional shift, in terms of the skills that they've got, the knowledge they've got, the awareness, a whole bunch of stuff.
But also you could do something then about their body stance, the actual sort of getting back into the tacit, that sort of sense of how they stand in the world and sort of approach whatever it is, a bit like you were talking about, just seeing video and that.
So it wouldn't just be a changing their mind about it. It would be changing their stance in the world, be changing how they bring themselves into the world.
But then what that would be, then you could say, go away and do some of that, or and then they'd go out and do it, and then they'd come back and say, well, it didn't work, or it did work, or so that's where you get the continuing movement.
So as a coach, working with kind of where we've been today in that Heidegger type thing, what you would be facilitating with your coachee is that sense of being absorbed in
Yes.
stuff,
Yes.
doing.
Spot on.
And
Because that's a bit where
And
some of
that's
it
the
we've been losing a bit,
intervention.
is the absorption, is the
Yeah.
absorbedness in stuff, isn't it?
yeah, and that's the intervention that you would be trying to refine, would be around how you help
Hmm.
them to become more absorbed in the doing of without necessarily thinking about, because that then is skilling them up to perhaps lose their anxiety. Or
Because their anxiety would mean that they are absorbed in what they're doing in a particular way, which I'm sure would be feeding the anxiety. It's absorbed in doing something in a way that they're getting judged from the outside as doing this poorly, where they might be feeling that they're about to be shamed, all kinds of stuff. So it's the coaching would be about raising awareness of those processes, going back in and seeking to try something different, to develop the tacit, if you like, skilled capability to do it differently, and therefore the world is going to experience that as differently. You know, the judgments are going to be different in terms of if it's more effective in the world. And what I quite like, it's a lot of it's in Dreyfus. He's saying that when somebody, he says, a real master of something, in a situation, is someone who's so steeped in their experience that they completely respond to what's needed without thinking about it. They do it. But to get to that point is actually, you know, if you're a tennis player, thousands of hours of knocking the ball back and forth or whatever. It takes real engagement. And I think the coaching is the reflective practice. People who are the best at what they do have a coach, don't they? To take that reflective practice moment to notice how they're going about it, and then to try and do something. It's like that cycle of from to do with competence or unconscious competence. I mean, it's a very has a very Cartesian ring about it, but it's about noticing and then getting to a place where you've tried something enough so you can just do it. You don't have to think about it.
Yeah, it's moving from being unconsciously incompetent to being consciously competent.
That's right.
So you have to raise awareness first.
That's right.
I'm now consciously incompetent.
Yeah.
Okay. Next step, consciously competent. Next step, don't even think about being competent.
That's right. You just do it.
Yeah.
That's. I've just made a connection to the inner and outer game, that one, because not even thinking about it, just doing it.
That's right. And so in the inner and outer game, what happens is that you can be good at something, but as soon as you step back and start to think about it, because of all the concerns about evaluating, being judged and whatnot, which is a lot of what stops people and gets in people's way, that's when you trip yourself up. So it's some of it can be about, I'm sure that a lot of sports coaching is about this, is about how to stop that, how to just be there, but that absorbed engagement.
I once saw an interview with Michael Phelps. It was actually outside Buckingham Palace when they announced we were going to get the Olympics. The interviewer from the BBC said, he's the greatest Olympian ever because he's won 14 gold medals. And she said, what do you think about when you swim? He said,
Nothing.
Think about nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. You just do it, don't you?
Yeah, you swim.
Imagine how much better it'd be just trying to get the line a little quicker.
The thing about Michael Phelps is he's also got a physiological advantage. His arm span is actually longer than his toe, and that makes a big difference.
It feels like this has been a day. Do you want to?
Sorry, I'm still in my.
Go on.
I'm still in my
Go on.
quizzical
Do.
bit. I guess what I'm struggling with now is going back to this thing about our practice as coaches, really. And just that last sort of interchange around, part of our job as coaches is to get people to a sense where they can just, become unconsciously competent. But I think if I was thinking about people I've worked with recently or I'm working with, it's a real challenge, that one, isn't it? If someone comes along, and it might not be that they're in that anxiety mode because they think their boss is judging them for circumstances, but some people are coming because they're reflecting on themselves, aren't they? And they're saying, I know I can do this stuff, but I wish I could deal with people better.
Well, I
come back to bite me. So I suppose what I'm struggling with, and I've been very interested in your sort of shift that you've been describing, is again, what would we do differently? What would we say differently in order to bring this to us?
Can I just, so my thought about that is that it's about acting unconscious, competently, about that sort of just doing in the moment. Okay, so when I'm here, I'm not thinking about, am I doing this right? When I walk away from here, I will certainly be thinking about, how did that go? Were the slides right? Was my energy right? Have I got clear? So when in that reflective practice moment, when I step back, I'm ready for coaching, should we say? But when I'm here, I'm just in here. Whereas if I'm lacking confidence, I'll be thinking, oh, how's this going? Looking around at people's faces and thinking, oh God, they think it's not going right. So I think it's that. It's not that I'm not able to. It's when I'm. It's like a cricketer. When they're just doing it. And afterwards they might watch the videos of it and see how they got out or whatever, or even how they got a good six. So I think it's different places you're doing the stuff in.
But wasn't your question, Jill, that if you've got someone who's coming to you as a coachee saying it's the way I am with them, I need to change myself, what you're wondering is, or are you wondering, how do I work with that with this new model?
It's just linking up the point that Karen brought in about, just get them in the moment and go on. With the point you made earlier about you're now thinking about skills and how people do things and practicing and almost going away and then reflecting and coming back. And it's just marrying up those two bits. It looks like perhaps I need to speak to you outside. Perhaps I'm the only one with this. It's something about, it's easy to say, get your head in the moment and become competent, don't think about it. But I'm trying to think how one would work with coaching. It just sounds a bit glib, doesn't it?
I'm not sure if this is right, but Pauline Clare. I was talking to her about the inner and outer game stuff. I don't know if people haven't met Pauline. She's one of our associates. She was the first woman chief constable, so she knows the stuff, thing or two about leadership. And she coaches people go in front of leadership panels. And of course the inner game goes absolutely berserk there. Because people go to the panel, they spend their time trying to suss out what everybody's thinking about them. So she's tried to help them, coach them to be there in the moment. And so what she has done is that they've talked about what enables you to be there just in the moment, which is things like really listening to what somebody is saying and stuff like that, really engaging. And she's coached them to do that in other circumstances. So with other people in other situations, to really develop the skills of really listening and really engaging so that they're becoming more capable and more skilled and they're just becoming unconsciously competent, if you like. And then taking that into the panel. And they're discovering that because they've done the practice, they've developed the skills, they're much more able to tune in and get on with it. Was that?
That's a great practical example. That's what I'm trying to say. What in practice can we do to help people develop?
And that's something I would never have thought of as a therapist. It's too, I can swear that, too bloody pragmatic. It's so I don't know, where's this? It's not very sexy, is it? In terms of therapy, But it's, It's really seeing people in the world and what they need to develop to be there.
So does that link to solution-based coaching? Is that from what you've just described?
May well
Body
do.
is the solution, isn't it? That,
It may well do.
listening, you can imagine these listening skills being
It may well do,
taking
yeah.
that to that.
Yeah. So there may be some good stuff in, I'm sure there is some good stuff in that solution-based approach. Should we have a break? What we'll do is have a break now and get into the learning groups and give a chance to chew over some of this this sort of meaty stuff that we've been getting into. Okay, so if we were to come back, say, 25 to?
So we're going to have our tea break first, then
Yeah, yeah.
25 to.
Well, I mean, you can do it either way. If you want to get, we've got, I'd like people to say come back, say at half past 4, so we've got a bit of time for a plenary, and then posing round. But so if you want to have time now, and have a break.
Yeah, so we're coming back to get into it.
Yeah, okay, we'll come back 25 to, yeah.
Andrew, just want to see cancer.
Thank you very much.
Speak.